Welcome to a brand new show on Talk Radio on TV. This is called Plank of the Week. And for the first show of this great series that we're about to do, I have encountered two people who are going to be great contributors over the course of this year, I'm sure. Not every week, but more than once, I'm sure. Russell Quirk is here, who is, of course, a property guru, a man that knows an awful lot about plankery. And I'm not going to say that because you are one, but you're a frequent appearance on the Julia Hartley-Brewer Breakfast Show and many other places on Talk Radio as well. Also with us, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, soon to be ex-MEP for, is it the South East or the North East? Is it? I can't remember.
Midlands.
East Midlands, there you go. This is a woman, by the way, who has absolutely dedicated her life to rooting out planks all over the place, wherever they are. So what I've asked Annunziata and Russell to do today, and I'm going to be doing it as well, is to come up with, say, 3 or 4 names of people that have particularly irritated them over the past week. And we're going to try and whittle it all down to one, by which point we will have found who is the king or queen of the planks this week. So, Russell, let me start with you. I know that you've been feverishly preparing for this, right? So you've probably got quite a lot of names of people.
I found, Mike, that I was spoilt for choice, frankly. This whole plank thing, I think you've opened up a Pandora's box.
I have.
There's many to choose from. Do you want my first one?
Yeah, go on.
A nice easy one to start.
Yeah, go on.
Has to be Jeremy Corbyn. It was one of the most humiliating election defeats that the country's ever seen.
Yes.
The worst for Labour since the 1930s, has been well reported. And yet Jeremy Corbyn still pops up on social media and on the telly trying to hold Boris Johnson and co to account, which is frankly hilarious. He now has absolutely no mandate whatsoever. What he should have done and should now do is to stand down and let somebody come in as a caretaker, and then we'll let the kind of circus of the Labour leadership election over the next few weeks play out. Right. But the fact now that he's seeking to move amendments in Parliament, which apparently he's going to do this week,
well, was he not also, and was he not asking for a top secret, high security level meeting with the Prime Minister?
He was
about the Iranian business
and to have access to the information. Which
I don't think so.
Well, I presume it's so he can go back to the Iranians and tell them exactly what he said.
Give it straight to Press TV, I presume. The
I
people
think the
who used to
security
pay
services might be worried.
Well, he wouldn't be allowed in the meeting, would he? He wouldn't have the security clearance, presumably.
I mean, I must admit, though, during that period of time when the old drone strike happened, you thought to yourself, do you imagine what would have been like if Jeremy Corbyn was actually the Prime Minister? What would he have done? What would he have said?
And this is also the man, not forgetting that some years ago, albeit, took £20,000 from Iranian state-backed TV,
Press TV
for 4/5 TV appearances.
Yeah.
So the Iranian regime has paid Jeremy Corbyn money.
Yes, he's extraordinary, absolutely amazing.
Proper plank.
He is a proper plank. Now let's get your first one in the because we'll sort of sashay around this and just come up with a few names and see where we are.
I was thinking about all the candidates to replace Jeremy Corbyn, and I think it's fair to say that each and every one of them has done something worthy of being on a plank list.
That's true.
But I think the Lib Dems trump this week.
Yes.
The Labour Party and Ed Davey just takes the biscuit. We have just had a big national election where Remain has been wiped off the map, quite literally.
The Lib Dems have been wiped off the map as well.
The Lib Dems are virtually extinct again. They had 11 last in 2017, they've got 11 again. They're not winning the arguments about remaining in the EU.
Without wishing to blow my own trumpet, I did predict that they would go back down to where they were because they had this ridiculous idea that because loads of people had gone and joined them from the Tory party and the Labour Party, that suddenly they were more popular in the country than they thought they were.
They're back to the level of being able to have their conference in a phone box, aren't they, as was famously said some
back
years
of a
ago.
transit van.
And Ed Davey, of course, this week has called for a public inquiry, hasn't he?
He has, into the mis-selling scandal of Brexit. I think he's forgotten that our Chancellor, our Prime Minister, the whole of the establishment were pro-Remain.
Yeah, but another thing he's forgotten, of course, is the fact that the Liberal Democrats, when they were in coalition, they promised everybody that they'd abolish tuition fees.
Yes.
They also promised everybody that they would increase benefits, and the second that they were in power, and they had the trappings of the ministerial jags and so on, they immediately voted with the Conservatives to increase tuition fees and to reduce benefits. So if ever there should be an inquiry, surely it should be into that, and that rank hypocrisy.
And their rank hypocrisy on changing from being the original proponents of having a referendum on our EU membership to being the people opposing it. And now saying it should be ignored and we should stay.
Classic.
Not only should we stay, we should have this public inquiry into the mis-selling scandal of the Brexit campaign and no party, no celebrations He thinks the budget should not be provided for us to celebrate that we're actually
misery.
finally leaving. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm in a state of optimism at the moment. I think the world is our oyster.
The whole country is.
Me too.
We've got a great opportunity. Let's seize it, but let's enjoy it along the
but
way.
These inquiries, let's be clear what the likes of Chilcot and Leveson cost. They cost between 10 and 15 million pounds of taxpayers' money. What do they achieve?
And can you tell me what the end result was?
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to change anything.
I can't remember.
I mean, if ever there was a subject that has been
if
debated,
they ever finish, lots of them never ever end.
If ever there was a subject that's been debated and kicked around for 3.5 years, very, very thoroughly, it's been subject to 3 national votes now.
Yes.
Look, Brexit's done.
Yeah.
Brexit's
It really is. And you know what's interesting is that I was talking to somebody down in Westminster just today who said that the whole atmosphere now is completely changed. It's completely different. There's none of that rancour. There's nobody waving European flags around or shouting "Stop Brexit" through a megaphone. Everything has gone very quiet. People are getting on with the job of government, which is what they're paid to do. And nobody's going, but what about stopping Brexit? What about, we can't do this. None of it's all gone.
But
It's
I
literally
think
gone.
it's the same
Except
in the
the Liberal
country, except for the Liberal Democrats. But people are coming together. They now have a future to look forward to and want to make it work for the best for the country, whichever side they were on before. And I think that's the route we all need to take. Leavers should not any longer really be attacking people who were Remain.
Yeah.
And Remainers should no longer be attacking Leavers. We should just all move together
get on with
to
it.
get on with it.
Exactly right. So I presume are you nominating Ed Davey or the Lib Dems altogether?
Oh, tempting. But there aren't very many of them. So no, just
they can almost make a top
It's almost
10
one
just
of
on their own.
It's almost one of the same.
So you're going to go for Ed Davey. I'm going to go for a joint first offering because it's partly based upon Iran and partly based upon the ludicrous nature of Hollywood. Because Rose McGowan, you might have seen on the front pages this week, she's a plank for sending a message out on Twitter to Iran, right? After our friend was knocked out by a drone from some kind of room in the bottom of the White House. She goes, the 52% of us do not support Donald Trump, effectively, I'm paraphrasing here. We love you, and please do not kill us, because what we would like to do is say to you that we are being held captive by a dictator
who is a terrorist, I think she
in
said,
a terrorist state. Yeah. She's basically saying that America is being
the protagonist
run
and the
like
terrorists.
Iran is being run.
Yeah.
And also that she is more in favour of Iran and a guy who's murdered thousands of people and under whose watch
US citizens,
many
Western.
more thousands of people.
And
Soleimani the murderer. I mean, this is a guy who's like something out of the Nazi party.
Yeah.
I don't know if you, Mike, saw the footage of the Iranian parliament.
I did.
Yeah, where it was entirely men.
Yeah.
There was one woman dressed head to toe in black with
Right.
her face covered, or most of her face covered. And is that what Rose McGowan is saying is better?
And also the fact that you can see on any number of websites, if you wish to look for it, the hanging of homosexuals, which they do as a matter of course.
But
the
one
killing
wonders
of
when
people who
people
they disagree with.
When people say these things, I mean, air travel, I presume, is still available between the United States and Iran. I mean, if she thinks Iran's such a wonderful place to live, she should rock up.
And she's going to get a joint offering here with Michael Moore, the big fat guy that does all sorts of movies that
Fahrenheit
people used
and
to
so
think were great. But he sends a tweet out saying that he's actually sent a note to the Ayatollah in Iran apologising for Mr. Trump's behaviour and saying, please don't commit any acts of violence against us. We will sort it out at our end. Who do these people think they are?
He will get through they will find a route through this peacefully.
Yeah.
But you're up against bloodthirsty murderers.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure how that works, but I love the end of his tweet, which said, I will post his reply.
Yes.
And the self-importance to think the Ayatollah is going to reply to a bloke he's probably never heard of. It's just
I can't imagine that
breathtaking.
the high theological leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran
It's not going to make him change his mind.
has a copy of Fahrenheit 9/11
but it's not gonna make-
in his kind of library of videos.
As the Iranians are potentially sitting there plotting what to do next,
Right.
it's hardly going to change their minds. Is it that Michael Moore sent a tweet saying, no, please don't? Oh, OK, then we won't.
P.S. I'm the guy that stopped them selling bullets in Walmart. I mean, just ridiculous. So that's my first offering. So we'll come back to you, Russell, for number 2.
OK, so my second is a bit obscure, but bear with me. So it's Highbury Corner magistrates.
Okay.
All of them.
Right.
This week they
This is
sat...
in North London.
North London, yeah. They sat presiding over over the case, you might remember, where Catherine Jenkins, the singer, was mugged. She
Right.
had her phone stolen. And let's be clear that was as a consequence of her running to the aid of a pensioner, that this ne'er-do-well, this 17-year-old, who can't be named for legal reasons, where she had stolen or attempted to steal a pensioner's handbag. So a violent attack, North London, bag gets stolen, Catherine Jenkins intervenes, and her phone gets stolen, the girl runs off, but then gets caught. The magistrates yesterday let her off, and not just let her off, but let her off on the basis that she has said that her penance should be that she's prepared to apologise to Catherine Jenkins face to face, which kind of makes it all okay.
How is that in any way acceptable?
No wonder in Britain, and particularly in London, we have this kind of feral approach to crime being so prevalent now. It's an epidemic. When our magistrates that have the power to do something about these things, because look, one minute you're mugging someone, the next minute you're stabbing them. It's a kind of a graduation, isn't it? And the magistrates at this particular magistrates court thought it was perfectly okay to issue this girl, whoever she is, with what they called a referral order, which is effectively sitting like the three of us are for a couple of hours. Literally a little tap on the wrist, and off you go, just to go and commit the same crime again. So they make my list
that is outrageous.
as number 2.
That is absolutely outrageous. Annunziata, number 2 for you.
Number 2 for me, I think, has got to be George Osborne.
Yeah.
But
I think he might have been the worst Chancellor of all time.
I think he was a very bad Chancellor.
Yeah.
He made some really poor decisions.
He did.
He certainly made some incredibly bad predictions.
He did.
The Project Fear is still having repercussions. People are still afraid. And so far, they have been proved so wide of the mark. I think it was in the first 2 years, he was over 4.6% of GDP out.
Well,
how bad it would go.
In a property sense, he was quoted before the EU referendum as part of this whole Project Fear thing, him, Cameron, Mark Carney and so on, specifically stating that from a property market point of view, that if the country voted to leave, so just voted, let alone Brexit actually happening, that property prices would drop 18% immediately. Do you know what they've done since? They've gone up 9%. So George Osborne on house prices alone was 27% wrong, which is quite a lot.
That is quite a lot. He's also made a hell of a mess of the Evening Standard as well, isn't he?
I'm not sure he was a Conservative. Look, we did again, going back to property, what he did to stamp duty. Hiking it and hiking it.
I'll tell you what he's also done to small business, because I have a small business that I rather laughably call a small business, but it's just me basically being a journalist. But, it is a company. And the taxes that he put on small businesses and the red tape that he put on small businesses, we're all still paying the price of that, Shocking.
But all of these figures pale, really, in comparison to his baby, his utter baby of HS2.
Oh, yes.
And he went against official advice when he was Chancellor to keep pushing and pushing that HS2 is the best thing since sliced bread. And Lord Berkeley, the Deputy Chair of the inquiry into it, has just come out this week.
Just trashed it. I had him on my show, funnily enough, and he was absolutely apoplectic about how badly run the whole thing has been.
It's been extraordinary. It's well over double budget, which how?
Also, there are people working for the HS2 project. I think they've got some ridiculous number, like over 100 people making more than 6 figures. Some of them making as much as 700,000 a year. They haven't done anything. They actually haven't laid any track yet.
And the concept of HS2, which is to kind of open up the north, but also allow the north to be more accessible from a London perspective, actually could have the opposite effect in terms of it not being beneficial to the north. It could just mean that people continue to work and operate in London, but commute from further flung places. And also, so actually, all it does is benefit the southeast even further.
What people will know, particularly those who don't live in London, like you and Annunziata, people who live in places like Leeds want to get to Newcastle, they want to get to Manchester. They don't necessarily just want to come to London. They need infrastructure in the north of England. And I think I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be alive by the time it's finished. So I'll never get to go on it. So I agree with George Osborne.
I'm not sure my bump will be alive by the time it's finished.
Absolutely right. Now, on the same sort of theme of transport, I'm going to nominate York Council. These are the people who've decided that they want to pedestrianise the entire centre of York City, which is already partly pedestrianised, but they now want to make it completely and utterly pedestrianised in order to save the planet. Now, there are many things you can do to save the planet. Somebody will say to you, well, you've got to start somewhere. The point about York is that I actually had one of their councillors on, and I showed him at the table I had of air quality in York. And do you know what? The air quality in York is some of the best air in the entire country. And I asked him about what the level of nitrogen oxide was supposed to be that you were meant to be under, and he gave me some UN figure of something like 49. Every street in the centre of York is in single figures.
And do you know what they're voting on tonight, that same council, apparently today?
What?
That solar panels should be compulsory on every house that's built.
They've obviously been taken over by the Greens. They've got Greens and Lib Dem councillors. And this is the bit about, where people say, Steve Bannon once said to me, elections have consequences. You have to be so careful that you don't allow these people into your local actual council, because they'll start fining us, they'll start making you recycle more, they'll start punishing you for parking a car, for having a car. And so York Council are completely and utterly out of control as far
But
as
pedestrianising
They also,
high
just
streets.
before Christmas, voted themselves as much as a 50% pay rise.
The council,
in some cases, for their own work that they do.
Their allowances.
Absolutely.
But pedestrianising high streets and town centres always ends up in businesses going bust.
Yep.
Always.
And also, what about people who are disabled, the elderly who can't walk long distances? I think there's
And increases crime.
Cut it off.
And you can't
It's
just go
terrible for
shopping.
crime.
You can't just go shopping, without a car. If you have a car, there's a reason why you go shopping in a car. You can put more in the car. So you only have to go once, as opposed to having to take about 5 different journeys. So it's completely ridiculous, nonsensical and plankish, in my view. So I don't know we're going to get more time than 3, actually. I think we might have to limit it to 3 each in order to proceed to get this all shut down in half an hour.
Talking of ridiculous and nonsensical, my third is the BBC.
Ah, yes.
I cannot fathom how in this day and age, when we've got particularly the likes of Netflix and subscription-based TV now, which is successful, and Netflix are making their own stuff, their own programs and so on. I cannot fathom how we not only have a broadcaster that taxes its occupants, the residents of the UK, to watch it, but also is not accountable in any way whatsoever. And I think that's epitomised, as far as I'm concerned, by the appalling Christmas television.
Oh,
now, I don't know if you tried to watch television on Christmas.
Dreadful.
The only thing worth watching, arguably, was Gavin and Stacey at 8:30 at night.
Yeah, I didn't bother with that.
Well, I watched it. It was all right. I don't think it was fantastic. But my point being, I remember as a kid growing up that the BBC, and in fairness ITV, on Christmas Day and all around Christmas would be fantastic television. There'd be things that had been made especially, and there'd be some really, really good kind of some good telly put on. And this year was pathetic. And I think one of the reasons is that no one is accountable whatsoever in that organisation.
No.
So they have a budget of between £3 and £4 billion a year, plus the money, of course, they make from BBC Worldwide. It's about time that whole thing was overturned, looked at again, and not funded by people that potentially don't even watch the thing, let alone disagree with the content that they churn out.
I saw a programme the other day, and I can't remember if it was part of the news or it was just a package in the news, but it was a regular feature that they do, looking at 5 teenagers from different parts of the world, right? So they've got somebody from India, I think, they've got somebody from South America, they've got somebody from Southeast Asia. Basically the idea is to try and talk to teenagers and find out what they're thinking, and it's a Newsbeat production or something, right? Can you imagine how much that would have cost? They're flying film crews all over the world to film these sort of bozos, to my mind, who have known nothing about anything, and they're talking about their futures. I couldn't care less, and I certainly don't want the BBC funding it.
Yeah.
But also they're meant to be impartial, and we can see by their latest hiring to Newsnight, what impartiality that
Lewis Goodall,
thinking it's acceptable to have someone who campaigner might be marginally
but he's never been a journalist.
Well, he didn't cover himself in balanced glory, did he, when he was at Sky?
He's a Labour activist. He always has been.
Yeah. And I think it tells you a lot. I remember 10 years ago or slightly more, I was in their studios and I got into the lift, and a man, I had no idea what his name was, worked on BBC News, said, "Are you the token Tory that we've got on tonight?" And I said, I guess so, as I was a Conservative Party candidate back in those days. And he said, "I'm voting for Boris. Don't tell anyone or I'd be fired." Well, that's not an impartial organisation.
The programme W1A, apparently when you talk to people at the BBC, they say that literally could be a fly-on-the-wall documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pathetic and ridiculous and hilarious, but it is exactly what it's like.
Right.
All this kind of, wokeism and
but it also takes you back to the argument that people have that they've forgotten that what journalism is, and this was something that I can't remember who said it, but it's a great thing to say. Your job as a journalist is not to represent everybody and tell everybody what they think is the way it is. Your job is to dissect what it is that they're saying and actually work out whether they're telling the truth. Like if one person says it's raining and another person says it's not, you look out the window and see which one of them's right. You don't present them both as if they've both got the same argument, which is what the BBC has finally ended up doing. They've decided that, it's a good idea to represent, the most obscure religion in the world because it might be upsetting to them if you don't.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous.
It's an outdated institution.
Yeah.
It's funded in a
I think
ridiculously archaic way.
it's going to die.
And it has to change.
I
Good
totally
nomination,
agree.
that.
Yep.
Could be the winner.
And
He's thrown down the gauntlet to you, Annunziata.
he really has.
Go on, what's your third?
Well, there is an institution I think merits joining the BBC, and it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think Ricky Gervais did such a good job of
did.
making them aware that they are all planks.
They are.
That
They didn't listen to him, though.
They
'cause
don't
did
need
get
me.
up, and they got, Kate Blanchett got up and started ranting on about the climate change disaster that's happening in Australia. Went on and on and on, and they all gave her a big round of applause, because you do,
And Tom Hanks' face. It's worth rewatching Ricky
Yes.
Gervais's speech.
He
just
must have had such
for
fun
that.
writing and performing
Well,
that.
the thing
He
is
must.
great.
Just
I would
prodding.
love to be Ricky Gervais for a day, because he's got such disdain for these guys. They pay him a fortune to do what he does,
Yeah.
but he's so wealthy now, he doesn't give a shit.
But of course he says
if
it
if they fired him, he wouldn't care.
He says it in such a way that he's joking,
Yeah.
but he's not. I mean,
No.
I think he means it.
Well, the DiCaprio stuff was brilliant as well.
Yeah.
When he said, he'd waited so long in the lobby that his girlfriend had got too old for him. I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, you just know that he's talking the truth there,
But as a follow-up to that, I believe it was Joaquin Phoenix who persuaded them to have a vegan dinner
Oh, yes.
at the awards.
Right.
And to follow up on that, Stella McCartney has tweeted, and I don't know if it's serious or not, because they are so beyond being planks that I can no
You
longer tell.
literally can't tell if it's
No
irony
idea.
or not, no.
That he is a great symbol of sustainable fashion, because he is wearing one tux, which I believe is black tie.
Yes.
was one of hers, of course.
Right.
It was one of hers, naturally.
Of course.
For-
About 3,000 quid,
but
presumably.
he's wearing the same one. Well done, him. Let's give him a pat on the back for a whole awards season.
Wow.
A whole season.
Whole season.
Lovely of him, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that tremendous?
And-
How sustainable.
And the fact I don't know if that is
See,
completely
I saw that tweet,
tongue-in-cheek.
and I thought it was a mock. I read it and assumed it was a mock.
But surely she wouldn't mock one of her own customers, though, would
Well,
she?
no, I guess not. But no, she's very serious.
Yeah. This is the trouble. You've absolutely nailed it there, because you can't tell whether they're being serious or not. You can't tell whether they're so unaware of themselves that they actually think anyone cares what they say or does.
Well, the attitude is a bit like Emma Thompson and so on, isn't it? That I will advocate your way of life in terms of preserving the planet. And it's like my dad used to say to me, actually, just do as I say,
Yeah.
not as I do.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is Hollywood.
She says,
do as I say, not as I do.
Caroline Lucas was the same, wasn't she? And she's not in it this week, but she might well make it in future weeks. She's still banging on about Brexit as well. She's the only Green MP in the country. There's never going to be
And that's
another
telling,
one.
isn't it?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
If there's this whole green movement going on, why haven't they got any more
Yeah,
MPs?
they should have hundreds.
And they'll say, well, it's because we haven't got proportional representation. But anyway, she has been going on about how we shouldn't be flying in planes. Turns out that she's got a son that lives in America who she goes to visit.
Yeah. And she
then
said she wouldn't give it up.
As she was being asked about it, she said, well, of course, it's not about individual contributions. Well, except for when you're telling me that I can't fly to America to see my family,
and
but it's all
telling-
right for you to go. Why doesn't he come to you?
Yeah.
And that way you'd have no carbon footprint.
And no, the British people aren't allowed to have one holiday a year.
No.
But the people in these elevated positions can fly all over the place for personal, professional, or leisure reasons.
Well, it's like Harry and Meghan, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Who have been taking time off from their very busy schedule. They'll be back soon, apparently. God help us. After a 6-week break, staying at the home of a friend of hers in Canada. It's worth 12 million, this mansion.
Yeah, which they flew to.
And this is which they flew to.
Yeah.
And this was a woman who says that nobody ever asked her how she is.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, she's
that's
too busy
because-
being up in the
And
air
she
in
gets, no,
planes.
she gets no support.
And she gets no support. And
No.
they're just
She's
sort
never
of-
here. How
They're
can we?
they're just getting by. So they're going to make an appearance on this plank list, I can be sure. But we're back now to my final nomination is going to go all the way back to Boxing Day, I'm afraid, because one of the things that we know is that, as we've said before, there are going to be some people who are never going to get off the plank list. And Jolian Maugham, or Jolian Moron, as I like to call him, is going to still be a nomination for me because, of course, famously, wearing his wife's kimono, with a bit of a hangover, it would seem, he decided that it would be a good idea to beat to death with a baseball bat a fox that was tied up in his backyard due to some string that he'd put out to protect his chickens. And then he thought it was an even better idea to tweet about it and tell the entire world. He hasn't been seen or heard from since.
Well, that's the worst thing almost. It's abhorrent that he did what he did.
Yeah.
But why on earth would you tell the world, given who he is?
And he sort of boasted about it.
He's
as well.
in the crosshairs anyway, isn't he?
Yeah.
Insofar as his role in the whole Brexit thing.
Yeah.
And then to go and tweet that he's done it, I mean, yes, your naming of the man in terms of your paraphrasing is very appropriate.
And then be surprised by the response to his tweet. I had a look at his profile. He's tweeted over 100,000 times.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got over 100,000 followers. You would think he'd got used to how Twitter works.
Yes.
And if you tweet something absolutely disgusting, people are going to jump on
Do you
you.
think he's killed his own career? Has he
I
done a
think
rat?
he might have done.
Has he done a rat?
I think he actually has, because he's damaged his own career, because his career in the end is based on judgment.
I mean, I wouldn't
He's a
want to hire him
QC.
as a QC.
He's a barrister, right? I mean, he's never won anything, by the way. He's a tax advisor who suddenly found himself as the kind of the
Which is
leading
Gina
light
Miller
of the Gina Miller
brigade,
brigade, and Dale Vince, that guy that I like to talk to from Ecotricity down in the West Country, right, who keeps funding his ridiculous lawsuits against the government and against Brexit. And I wonder whether, as a lawyer, he's been told to take a step back by his own law firm to say, look, you better, get the hell out of Twitter before it bites you.
I really hope so, because one of his responses to his original I bashed a fox tweet was that he didn't, quote, especially enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, as a lawyer, I'm pretty sure he would know that not especially enjoying something means you did enjoy it to some extent.
Yes, exactly.
Which makes the whole thing even more revolting.
Oh, and then he was also joking about it with his sort of funny lawyer mates who were making all sorts of asides at the beginning before he realised he'd made a massive blunder. But he's not very bright. I mean, I've known a lot of barristers in my time, and they all think they're incredibly intelligent. And most of them are actually not very intelligent at all. The secret barrister, right, tried to accuse me of libelling him and demanded that, or her, I don't know if it's a woman or a man, demanded that I take down a tweet that was libellous. I said, mate, you are an anonymous figure. You don't exist.
Yes, how can I lie
suing me? And he's meant to be a lawyer, right? The next one was Maugham.
That's got to go on the list.
I know. Well, it was a while ago. He's also blocked me now, the secret barrister, because that's how brilliant he is, Jolian Maugham, again, has blocked me.
But the saving grace is that Jolian at least has gone quiet for the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
That is good. I mean, I did actually say at the time, why didn't he just bore the fox to death by reading one of those Twitter threads that he puts out about Brexit, because they go on for like thousands of words, and you just think, you must be a deranged individual to even think like that.
Or he could have sued
Never
it.
mind, actually, or sued it. Yeah, but he would have lost that, though, because he does lose a lot. He demanded I take down some tweet in which he said that I'd accused him of making money from his business. I said, well, don't you make any money from your business? Well, I do, but not from this part of the business. And I said, which part of my tweet said that you were making money from this part of the business? And he just went back to blocking me again. These people are actually as thick as pig shit. I'm sorry.
You're making a good argument for him. You're making a very good argument.
I'm finding it very hard to remove him, not only from the list, but from number one on the list.
Number one.
Do you know? We now have to decide which 3 go into the final section. So here's an idea. Why don't each of us pick somebody else's one?
Yeah.
And then that would make it quite fair.
Well, I can do that very easily.
Not that I'm interested in being fair, as you know, because I run the...
So Jolian is my pick.
I am going to have to pick Jeremy Corbyn.
Okay.
Jeremy Corbyn. That's
Deserve
a good
it.
one.
He does deserve to stay on the list.
You can probably put the BBC in another time, because there'll
Any
be,
week.
There'll be other opportunities.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to go with what he was going to do and get Ed Davey in there, because I think Ed Davey really has proved himself to be certainly the biggest plank in the Liberal Democrats, which is saying something.
Yes.
Here's a thought. What if we were to eliminate one of the planks, leaving only 2, and then we could all vote on the 2? Jolian Maugham, Jeremy Corbyn, Ed Davey. Who would you remove?
I would only then remove Jolian because it's slightly historic now insofar as the incident itself.
And I would do the same for the same reason.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm going to plump for Ed Davey, because I think Ed Davey's more recent. Even though Jeremy Corbyn is still a plank for being in charge, he's been a plank for quite a long time, since December the 13th.
Yeah, and I would agree with that on the basis that if this is plank of the week, Ed Davey is very topical because he's been plankful, should we say, this week specifically.
He has. So now, in fact, what it means is that your vote doesn't count, because we've both voted for Ed Davey. So you might as well go home.
All right, see you.
I mean, just resign. Just resign.
But I think that sort of worked.
Would you make it unanimous? I mean, it was your suggestion.
I am very happy to have Ed Davey as plank of the week.
I think,
and I'm sure he will be too.
Yeah. This is going very well. Thank you both very much for sparing the time to come and see us. Russell Quirk and Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Congratulations on the impending birth, and hopefully we'll see you before that happens. That was plank of the week. It's Ed Davey. What do you know?